We've been looking at the pillars of the tonal system, the 1, 4, and 5 chords. Up till now we've only discussed these chords in root position. Now it's time to look at the first inversions of these harmonies, bringing in a new topic, harmonic weight. If you listen to a root position chord, and then the same chord at first inversion, the root position has a kind of solidity that the inversion lacks. It's clear they're part of the same harmonic family. After all, the notes are the same, but we sense the importance of which note is in the bass. Having the root in the bass adds weight, whereas having the third of the chord in the bass makes the chord sound lighter, less stable. This is a very useful feature. We normally don't want all the harmonies in a phrase to be equally emphatic, any more than we want all the words in a sentence to be equally accented. Musical phrases need nuance and variety of detail. Chord inversions are an important resource in this regard. Inversions also point us to another core concept in harmony, the importance of the bass line. Many beginning composers think that harmony is just a vertical stack of notes, and they learn a lot of labels for these stacks. Once you put several chords in sequence, the bass line becomes a very potent expressive resource. Choosing chords just by their color is fine and good, but there's so much more that we could achieve by paying attention to the bass line. Let's compare these two little phrases. The sequence of chords in the two phrases is identical, as are the soprano line and the rhythm. However, in the second example, the 4 and 5 chords are in first inversion. What's the difference in the sound? The first phrase is heavier. The second one has a more flowing quality. There's a definite sense that the 4 and the 5 chords are lighter here, like they're on the way somewhere. And when the tonic in root position arrives, there's not just a sense of functional arrival, but also of a return to greater weight and stability. Now let's try an experiment. This is the same progression, but now the tonic chord is also in first inversion. Apart from the colorful doubling of the third and the first and last chords, the phrase feels oddly unstable, like it has no clear center. This illustrates a critical point about inverted chords. Their instability makes them excellent for decorative purposes, but not very good as tonal anchors. In other words, in the first example, there's a definite sense that the 4-6 and 5-6 chords are circling around the root position tonic. In this new version, however, everything is equally unstable. Note that decorative here doesn't mean unimportant. The root position chords provide the pillars of the structure, but the decoration or ornamentation gives the phrase its distinctive character. From this we can draw an important conclusion. First inversion chords, commonly referred to as sixth chords, should be treated as decorations in the bass line. And since they act like ornaments, they need to be anchored onto root position chords. Most of the time, in fact, they're part of stepwise bass lines. Here are some examples. If we listen to the bass line here, the second chord is acting a bit like a melodic neighbor note. It moves away from the first note by step and then back. This is a neighbor chord. In performing this little progression, the 5-6 chord should be played a little more lightly than the surrounding tonic chords. Of course, we could imagine a different context where the composer might want to accent the 5-6 chords that would be played differently. Here's an example. The point here is just that the one thing the performer should avoid is playing the whole phrase with everything equal. The decision about what to emphasize needs to be based on music's character, and the harmonic structure is a big part of that. Here's another example of a sixth chord used as a kind of ornament. This is a little like our 1-5-6-1 example above, except here, instead of the bass moving a second, it moves a third. We can see this as a kind of larger neighbor note, and in terms of how we hear the progression, that makes sense. These techniques are sometimes referred to as prolongation of the tonic. Now a different kind of example. If we look at the functions here, they are 5, 4, 5, 1. But normally a 5 would not progress to a 4 if we want to maintain a clear sense of tonal direction. However, if you look at the bass line, this little phrase is an overall movement from the root position 5 to the root position 1, with intervening bass notes acting more like passing tones. In fact, we can think of the two chords in the middle as being essentially passing chords between the two tonal anchors. This is also a kind of prolongation, in this case of the progression from 5 to 1. Here the stepwise direction of the bass takes precedence over function, at least for the inverted chords. Never forget that chord roots are theoretical, unlike bass lines, which are very audible. A scalar bass line can create a very powerful sense of direction. And once again, this has obvious implications for performance. In our next lesson, we'll look at some other common uses for sixth chords.